Donkey Kong is one of Shigeru Miyamoto's most important creations. Without Donkey Kong, there might not be a Nintendo, having saved them after their previous arcade game, Radar Scope, was a commercial failure. It was the massive success of Donkey Kong that allowed them to fund the NES. But after building an empire off of his back, Nintendo strangely left their old pal DK to collect dust. While his rival Mario became the face of the company, and new faces like Link and Samus joined the fold, Donkey Kong was barely seen outside of the odd cameo for over 10 years, until he was reborn in Donkey Kong Country. It seems odd to me that Nintendo would let such an important character just fall to the wayside for so long, but what if they had actually been planning to bring him back sooner? Well, the recent Nintendo Gigaleaks, which revealed tons of unknown Nintendo prototypes, might have revealed some evidence that Donkey Kong's comeback had been in the works longer than we realized. What does this have to do with Yoshi's Island? And for that matter, what does this have to do with Plock? For today's video, let's take a look at the strange Nintendo prototype labeled Super Donkey. This video is sponsored by Ridge Wallet. I know some of you probably have big lumpy trifold wallets just poking out of your front pocket. I'm not judging, that used to be me too, and then I started to get into thinner, smaller wallets, and of all the wallets that I've tried, Ridge Wallet is my favorite. I've had this burnt titanium one for close to 2 years, and it's held up better than any other wallet that I've owned in my life. And if the burnt titanium look doesn't work for you, they have tons of other color options. Ridge is so confident in these wallets that they have a 45-day satisfaction guarantee. If you don't like it at the end, you can send it back for a full refund, and they also have a lifetime warranty, as well as free worldwide shipping and returns. Just go to ridge.com/wang or click the link in the description and use code WANG for 10% off your order. If you want to see the stream where I looked at all of the Nintendo Gigaleaks, go watch it on my Storyfire. I'll put a link in the pinned comment.
Nintendo. It's for breakfast.
As someone who's always been fascinated by lost media and weird video game stuff, these Nintendo Gigaleaks are filling me with the same sense of wonderment and magic that I used to have just sitting down with my Game Genie trying to find weird levels in the original Super Mario Bros. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, basically 2 massive sets of old Nintendo data were leaked recently. In this data exist several prototypes of old Super NES and Nintendo 64 games. You can see things like early designs for Yoshi where he has these weird skinny chicken legs and a beak and no shoes. This version actually to me kind of looks like Shigeru Miyamoto's original idea to have Yoshi in the original NES Mario Bros. In fact, this version of Super Mario World has everything for the reptile foot enthusiast, because we also got Bowser showing off the toes in this design that looks a lot like his Super Mario 3 version. And we've also got rooms from the original Zelda 64, and a human woman in Star Fox 2. Uncompressed versions of audio.
Do a barrel roll!
Oh yeah, and Luigi in Mario 64. And it seems like Luigi is everyone's favorite revelation so far, and it's totally understandable. It's probably been one of the most searched for things in all of gaming history. And while that's really cool, to me there's something even more interesting in here. To me, the most important thing to come out of this leak so far is a file included in the Yoshi's Island directory. A game labeled Super Donkey. Super Donkey features this pilot-looking dude in a jungle world filled with creatures that are both friendly and unfriendly. He's very round with limbs that are disconnected from a body in a way that's reminiscent of Rayman or Plock. But this appears to be mostly a stylistic choice, as he doesn't attack by launching his limbs. Rather, he can stomp enemies, charge up to fly, and he can use certain objects as weapons. The stages themselves appear to be very open and non-linear, with a map to tell you where on the screen you actually are. I imagine that if this concept was more fleshed out, it would be kind of an objective-based game. I think there probably would have been some kind of goal you had to reach before you were allowed to go through the exit doors that are on every stage. Like you have this stage with monkeys that you can pick up, and maybe you had to put the monkeys somewhere to pass to the next area. So why is this thing sitting in the Yoshi's Island folder called Super Donkey? Well, the obvious place your mind would go with this being a Nintendo game is that maybe This was supposed to be a Donkey Kong game. And in fact, in Japan, they referred to Donkey Kong Country as Super Donkey Kong! So it would make sense that this was planned to be Donkey Kong's comeback game, and there is some evidence for that. Obviously, this little pilot guy isn't Donkey Kong. But historically, up to that point, Donkey Kong had been an antagonist. It makes sense that this might be a continuation of that, and some people have pointed out that this character resembles Stanley the Bugman from Donkey Kong 3. And that's honestly where my mind first went when I saw all this. I mean, I could just picture him pumping his little bug gas. But then I took another look at how Stanley actually looked, and he's a very different character. Honestly, the Stanley connection is probably just the case of fuzzy memories filling in the blanks. But that being said, Nintendo does have a long-abandoned character that looks like this. Sky Skipper, which was released shortly after the original Donkey Kong and featured a guy in a little airplane blowing up gorillas. But if you take a look at this character's sprite sheets, they reveal something else. Who is that? Mario? It definitely looks like he's either transforming or taking off his helmet to reveal Mario. I doubt it was intended for him to be this character, especially considering you don't normally see the mustache. If I had to guess, maybe this was supposed to be some kind of a brief sight gag, or maybe an item that did something. I mean, it is a Donkey Kong game, so maybe there's a point where you get a hammer and you go all and while we're looking at the sprite sheets, let's take a look at this one. Now, this could just be a generic gorilla. And if that were the case, it would point towards, once again, Sky Skipper. But that looks an awful lot like Donkey Kong. And to that end, I want to make two comparisons. First, look how similar this is to the design of the Game Boy game that came out in 1994. There's some differences like the placement of the hair and the tie. And the tie, by the way, was suggested by Shigeru Miyamoto during the development of Donkey Kong Country. When he made this suggestion, he sent Rare a few sketches. When we look at Miyamoto's sketches, we see that the hair on this Donkey Kong more closely matches what we see in this sprite sheet, down to the little points of hair on the back of his head. It was always strange to me that Nintendo released these two games so close to each other with two completely different designs for Donkey Kong. Perhaps this points to the fact that at some point there was more planned for this version of Donkey Kong. It's like looking into another dimension where this is the guy that we see in Smash Brothers. And the timing of all of this works out very nicely too. You see, the Super Donkey ROM is believed to be from early 1993. Nintendo's working relationship with Rare begins in the summer of 1993. This was after Tony Harmon, who was the product acquisitions and development manager at Nintendo of America, was impressed by Rare's 3D work. He brought this back to Nintendo, and Nintendo decided that they wanted a game in this style. There's conflicting accounts of whether Nintendo presented Rare with a catalog of Nintendo characters they can use, or whether Nintendo specifically requested a Donkey Kong game from Rare. But either way, Donkey Kong Country was the game they decided on, and it began in the summer of 1993. Obviously, Nintendo can't just put out two different Super NES Donkey Kong games with two completely different styles right back to back. So whatever was already being worked on had to go. But Game Boy, on the other hand, that's a whole other story, and really they're just revisiting the classic gameplay with that game. And honestly, I don't think that's the first time something like that happened to Donkey Kong. You see, there was another abandoned attempt at bringing him back, and even less is known about this one. All the way back in 1987, Nintendo began promoting a game called Return of Donkey Kong. He was mentioned in the official Nintendo Player's Guide, and then later in 1988 in the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter. That barrel-throwing rascal Donkey Kong is some kinda crazy. In Donkey Kong, he has Pauline in his clutches. In Donkey Kong Jr., he gets locked in a cage. In Donkey Kong Jr. Math, he knows the score in a math jungle. In Donkey Kong 3, he makes trouble for Stanley the Bugman. And now, Donkey Kong is soon to come back with more barrel-tossing fun, but this time, you're in control. Are you video buff enough to handle the one and only Return of Donkey Kong? Watch for it. Obviously, this game never materialized, but in 1988, Nintendo did put out a game called Donkey Kong Classics, which included the original Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. With that in mind, it seems like that was their formula for a proposed Donkey Kong comeback. You remind people of the old games while teaming them up with the new game, but both times that didn't quite pan out as planned. Now, let's take a look at the Yoshi's Island connection. I've seen some people doubt that this game had anything to do with the development of Yoshi's Island, and it's a reasonable doubt. I mean, there's a lot of blanks being filled in with speculation here. There are similarities in the art style, and it was found in the Yoshi's Island directory, but to me, there's one thing that is an absolute smoking gun. I don't know if they were the first person to discover this, but it was the first person I saw point it out. Ilure on Twitter noted that a single background from Yoshi's Island is visible in Super Donkey. Not only that, but at the top of this background graphic there are trees that you can never see through normal means in Yoshi's Island. In Super Donkey, you can see these trees. Oh, and something else that I noticed after recording this video, it's probably even a bigger smoking gun, is the fact that this roly-poly bug enemy is in both versions of the game. So at the very least, these games are sharing some assets. Something else that stood out to me in this regard was a comment about the old game Plok. If you haven't played Plok, you absolutely should play Plok. It is hands down one of the best platforming games on the Super NES and very underappreciated. It managed to take these relatively linear stages and fill them with a genuine sense of exploration. It also features an incredible soundtrack and really distinct, almost clay-like art. It's punishingly difficult, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, very worthwhile. Well, in an issue of Retro Gamer, Steve Pickford, one of Plok's developers, mentioned that at one time, Nintendo was actually considering publishing Plok. Shigeru Miyamoto absolutely loved this game, but ultimately Nintendo wound up passing on it. Pickford said that he suspected Nintendo was developing Yoshi's Island at the time, and perhaps Plok was too similar. And if we look at Yoshi's Island as it is, that seems like kind of a strange statement. I mean, sure, they're both colorful platforming games, but that's basically where the similarities end. Really, the look of Plok is nothing like Yoshi's incredibly distinct hand-drawn style, and the gameplay couldn't be further apart, with Yoshi needing to take care of baby Mario, and Plok shooting his limbs and needing to hunt a specific amount of fleas. But if we look at Super Donkey, all of a sudden these similarities get a lot closer. All of a sudden now you have two characters with limbs floating in the air unattached to the body. And remember, at this point we're still a few years away from Rayman being in the picture. And then you have the mechanic where in some stages Plok needs to kill a certain amount of fleas before he can advance. If Super Donkey really did have objectives to advance to the next screen, as I theorized before, that would make it a lot more similar to Plok than Yoshi's Island wound up being. Of course, obviously for that to be true, Pickford would have had to have knowledge of Super Donkey. Maybe he did, or maybe this is all just a coincidence. Something else to think about was an interview on Nintendo's own website that came out during the promotion of the SNES Classic. In it, they spoke to the directors of Yoshi's Island. One of the directors, Shigefumi Hino, remarks on where his career was with Nintendo at the time. Hino is the creator of Yoshi, and he had been working as a character designer for Nintendo since Super Mario World. Before development of Yoshi's Island began, Miyamoto spoke to Hino and suggested that perhaps it was time for him to helm a project of his own. Here's what he said. "So, Miyamoto-san was trying to say that you should stop with the art and come up with a project. Yeah. So then I entered a period of thinking up all sorts of projects, experimenting with them, and canning them over and over. It got to the point where I thought if the next project fell through, I couldn't stay at the company." You were prepared for the worst. Yeah. Just then, I had the idea of making Yoshi the main character in a game. I began by starting to think about making the game a sort of spin-off of the Super Mario series. When Hino mentions all this experimentation and the starting of new projects, I can't help think that maybe this directory, which contains not only Yoshi's Island prototypes, but other seemingly related projects, are simply what remains of Hino's experimentation. And I say projects plural because there is another game in this directory, something called Sleep. Not much seems to be known about Sleep as of the time of me recording this, but it seems to involve a character that's sleepwalking. Something that could make for a pretty interesting gameplay mechanic, although I also see how this could basically just turn into a 2D escort mission. Whatever it was, it doesn't seem like it was as far in development as Super Donkey was. But something else to consider now is that in interviews, Shigeru Miyamoto has stated that development of a sequel to Super Mario World began almost as soon as the first one was done. In total, there's about 5 years of development in this game, so perhaps we have some kind of convergence here. Hino's Yoshi idea intersects with the Mario project that at that point, 1993, had been in development for 3 years, and thus, what we now know as Yoshi's Island is born. But if that's the case, what this also says to me is that perhaps something exists that we could call Super Mario World 1.5. An unfinished game to bridge the gap between 1990 and 1993. Something that, as of yet, we haven't seen at all. If there's one thing that's clear from this leaks, it's that, unlike most video game companies, Nintendo is incredibly fastidious about maintaining their archives. So if such a game does exist, maybe we'll see it someday. And with all this leaked stuff being combed through, and with promises of more leaks coming, that day might be soon. Although that being said, there's really only one thing on this planet that I need to see come from all of this. And you probably already know what I'm gonna say. Earthbound 64. I need to see Earthbound 64. But anyway, that's all for now. If you liked this video, check out my video about the actress behind the original Jill Valentine, because there's gonna be an update to this one very soon. Peace out.